So Alan Endicott, as a small boy, had started a collection all because of a cannonball, which we still have in the museum. And this cannonball looks very boring, but it actually is the reason this museum exists, because he found that cannonball as a 8-year-old boy out on Dartmoor one day, and it completely lit a spark under him.
You're listening to Come Here, the podcast for and about heritage attractions, where you can discover somewhere worth visiting. I'm your host, Dr. Liz Drury, a freelance voiceover artist with a background in archaeology, specialising in voiceover for the heritage sector. Each week, I chat to someone from a different museum, historic site, gallery or cultural space about why you should visit, and exactly what you can expect when you get there. Christy Turner is the manager and curator of the Museum of Dartmoor Life in Okehampton. The museum covers 5,000 years of history, and it all started because of a cannonball. Thank you very much for being my guest on the podcast today, Christy.
It's an absolute delight to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Liz.
So tell me what your role at the museum is and what you do, Christy.
So I am the manager and curator here at the Museum of Dartmoor Life. It's a part-time role, though it sometimes seems to take up a lot more of my time than that. We are mainly run by volunteers, so we are very lucky to have a fabulous team of about 30 volunteers who all do either a morning or afternoon shift in the museum and keep us going. And then we've got some extra volunteers who do things like rotas or buying things to put in the shop and that kind of thing. So it all helps me to do this job.
Yeah. So for anyone who's not been to the site before, how would you describe it?
It's really quirky. And I think a lot of people would say it's quite charming, it's quite old-fashioned. The museum itself is built on what was originally a medieval burgage plot. So it's very long and thin. Mm-hmm. So you come into a courtyard from the main road. We're in the centre of Okehampton. You come into a cobbled courtyard. You've got buildings either side of you, and at the end of the courtyard is quite a large, imposing mill. But you just see the very front of it. Mm-hmm. And because it's a narrow plot, it's a narrow building. So people are always amazed about how big the museum actually is, because from the front it doesn't look very big. It's a very pretty place to be. We have a little Victorian tea room in the courtyard, and so people are often sat out having green teas and things in the courtyard, which is lovely. It's a great place to work.
Yeah, it sounds it. So what period of history do you cover?
Well, we try to cover a bit of everything. I mean, we cover sort of 5,000 years because, a lot of Dartmoor, for people that have been here, Dartmoor is really famous for all of its architecture, its stone circles, its prehistory, really. So we want to obviously cover that area. But we also cover right up to, modern day. We do contemporary collecting as well. So we collect things. So recently we were looking at things like from COVID times, how that affected villages on Dartmoor. And also we've recently had the fights for the right to camp, the wild camp on the moor, which has been really interesting.
Yeah. So tell me about some of the artefacts that you've got. What can people see at the museum?
Well, it's a really varied collection. So because we cover such a wide range of historic sort of centuries, we've got a lot of, I'd say initially, we've got some prehistoric items. We've got sort of some axe heads. We've got some arrowheads, those sort of things that people would have used, scrapers, those sort of tools that people can see. We've got some Roman artifacts because obviously in the last sort of couple of decades they discovered the Romans had come down this far into Devon, which they didn't previously know. They actually had a fort here in Okehampton where we're based. So we've got some artifacts about that. We've got quite a few medieval items, including the original bells from Okehampton Castle, which was quite an important castle when it was originally built. And we've got things like some of the Lidford coins, from Viking
Hmm.
times. Um, Most of the Lidford coins were minted here on Dartmoor, but most of them can only be found in Scandinavia now. They're
Mm.
very rare in this country because they were used to pay off the Vikings, so that they didn't burn the houses down.
Mm.
So it's quite nice to have some of those for people to see as well. But we also have, I would say, we've got a very large Victoriana sort of collection.
Mm.
Um, Most museums tend to, because that was an era where people tended to keep
Yeah.
items. So when you could actually finally buy things, people kept them. And so we do have a really good, which is lovely actually, because a lot of our visitors recognise some of the items that are in the museum,
Yeah.
and it's a little bit of a meander down memory lane.
Yeah. Yeah. So 5,000 years is a lot to cover. How is the museum arranged?
So we're on 3 floors. We've got really good access. We've got a lift to all floors,
Hmm.
and we basically have a route round, and we send people up to the top floor to start with. And the first thing they'll come to is a Bronze Age hut. You can go and sit inside the Bronze
Hmm.
Age hut and experience what that might have been like. And we've got lots of the children to do, so they can dress up in Bronze Age
Yeah.
clothing and do a little bit of archaeology in a sandpit and build their own stone circle in a sandpit as well. Um, basically we start there, and then people follow the route round, which brings them down each floor. And it's kind of a timeline as well, so it's
Mm.
bringing them down through time, and they end up on the ground floor in sort of, which is mainly farming and the trades that are involved in farming, things like blacksmithing, cider making, all those sort of nice things is on the ground floor. And then you end up back in reception again. So we find having a route works best, especially with a long, narrow building,
Mm.
rather than having people just go sort of willy-nilly where they want.
Yeah. And is there something about the museum that surprises people?
Well, the size, I think, is the initial thing really that surprises them. Um, I think people that come here quite often have been surprised by considering that there's only one member of staff, me, and I'm part-time, and the rest is we do volunteers. I think they're surprised with how much we actually do,
Mm.
because we try to we want to get lots of visitors coming here, but we also like to look after our local community. So we like to do lots of things that will interest them in coming back every year. So
Mm.
we run new exhibitions every year. And I think the exhibitions sometimes are surprising to people. We've done some really interesting subjects, and that has really helped build our visitor numbers actually over the last 4 to 5 years.
Yeah.
So that's always surprising. Um,
So what special exhibitions have you got on this year?
So at the moment, we've got a new exhibition, which is really exciting. It's not your standard sort of exhibition. I've been working with another volunteer, going through our packed away collection.
Mm.
So bear in mind the museum first opened 45 years ago, and we have items in storage that have never actually made it onto the museum floor yet,
Mm.
and haven't been looked at for 45 years, some of them. So we thought this was a good opportunity to actually do a collection review of the packed away collection. So one day a week we sit down and we are slowly working through all the boxes, and we've been doing that now for many months. And that's actually fed into doing an exhibition which we've called Behind Closed Doors.
Yeah.
And this is actually giving our visitors the opportunity to see items that have never been seen before, but also to do a survey as they're looking around the exhibition and answer lots of questions about what they really want from a museum,
Mm.
what they want to see, what they don't want to see. And also we explain to them some of the difficult questions that we have to answer, and we want to know what their opinions are on these as well. So it's quite an unusual exhibition,
Yeah.
but people seem to be really embracing it, and they're quite engaged with it. So We've already got lots of, we only opened in March, and we've already got a lot of surveys have already been completed. And that all that information we will actually feed into developing the museum in the future.
Mm.
So it's a really important exhibition for us in that sense.
Yeah. And so where have all your artefacts come from? Are they things that local people have donated to you? And can people donate things to you?
It's well, the museum, when I say it sort of was the first thought about 50 years ago, and it was three main people. It was John and Rose Young, and in fact, their daughter is still involved in the museum.
Mm.
She's the current chair of our trustees, so the family has always been involved, the Young family, and another gentleman called Alan Endicott. So Alan Endicott was did my job 45 years ago, and he, as a small boy, had started a collection all because of a cannonball, which we still have in the museum.
Yeah.
And this cannonball looks very boring, but it actually is the reason this museum exists, because he found that cannonball as a 8-year-old boy out on Dartmoor one day, and it completely lit a spark under him. And he then started collecting items from local farms on Dartmoor and from local people. He also took down stories. People just brought things to him. And they had a cottage on the farm that was sort of not being used, was rather derelict. And he turned that into a little museum that people used to go to actually see these items. So, in fact, our collection here at the museum, when the museum finally opened, is made up a lot, to the basics are all from Alan's original childhood museum.
Oh, wow.
So we still have a lot of those items that he brought in.
Yeah.
And without those, the museum probably never would have happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the meantime, obviously, we have also gained lots of other things over the years. We do take items in, but we have to be really careful now because space is limited.
Yeah.
And in the past, as I'm going through the packed away collection, they were obviously took anything at one point. And there are lots of items that have been taken in, and you have no idea why they have, because they've got no relation to Dartmoor whatsoever. And as a museum of Dartmoor life, I think the first thing is, does this item have anything to do with Dartmoor?
Yeah.
Or tell a story about Dartmoor?
Yeah.
So if you can't answer yes to either of those questions, then we shouldn't have the item.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of that to be looked at. So people do come in with items now. Sometimes we take them. Sometimes they're really exciting. Other times we have to say no, thank you very much for thinking of it. But,
Yeah. Do you have any particular favourite artefact at the museum?
Oh, that's a difficult one. I've got quite a few favourites, really. I mean, I have to say the cannonball. It's always, with me, it's the story behind things. So some of the objects can look, kind of boring, I suppose. Something you might just walk straight past. But if they've got a really great story, you never look at the things again.
Yeah.
We've got a few things in the new exhibition, and one of them is a rather battered little mouth organ. And I started looking at this and thinking, well, why have we kept this battered mouth organ? And then I found out that it belonged to a young boy that lived in Okehampton during the Second World War. And one day he was crossing the road here, and he always carried that mouth organ with him. And he got run down by an American GI in a car and killed suddenly. So it's all of a sudden, that very battered, boring-looking little, harmonica it takes on a whole new meaning to you, and it's probably something that you'll remember for the rest of your life.
Yes.
So I think it's not always the object that's important. I think it's the story behind the object. And what really upsets me with a lot of the collection is that years ago people didn't always realise that.
Yeah.
So they took objects into the museum without taking the stories down. And that's kind of heartbreaking, actually, because we've probably lost some really fabulous stories over the centuries. And I'm sure that's true of most museums.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. How long should people allow for a visit to your museum?
Well, it depends what sort of a person they are, really. But I would say on average, people spend probably about an hour.
Hmm.
Um, if you've got children with you and you want to do all the different things there are for the children to do, you may spend a little bit longer, especially if we're doing crafting or anything like that at the time. Or if you're a person that likes to read everything, then there's lots of things that you can do. We have, as well as the exhibits, we have quite a few sort of QR codes around the museum.
Mm.
And if you use your phone to click on these QR codes, you can get extra information about certain artifacts, or you can be linked to, we have some fabulous time traveling curator films, which were filmed in the museum and out on Dartmoor.
Mm.
And they're really fun to watch as well. So there's lots of things you can spend longer doing. It just depends on, how much time you want to spend, really. But
Yeah.
the great thing is that when you come to our museum, we do charge, but you get a ticket that allows you free access for a whole year.
Mm.
So you can come in, have a look one day, and then hopefully come back again another day, see something else. Every time you come in, you'll find something different that you
Yeah.
haven't seen before.
Yeah.
So find people use those cards a lot.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that you have some dressing up clothes for the children. What other things are there for children to do in the museum?
Well, when they arrive, they're given a clipboard and they're given a sheet that says 15 things to do before you leave the museum. So they've got things to search for, things to look at, things to have a go at. So I mentioned before, you can build stone circles, you can hunt for hidden treasure. We have got things like rocks and, minerals for them to look at underneath, magnifying glass. We do lots of crafting, colouring, and quizzes. At the moment we're asking them to do a survey as well, because we want their opinion just as much as we want the adults' opinion of what they think of our exhibition. So yeah, there's lots of really good fun things to do.
Yeah. Do you cater for groups as well, Christy?
Yeah, we do quite a lot of groups, often, touring groups and things, coach parties or local history societies, that sort of thing. I often do a little talk when they arrive, tell them a little bit about the history of the site itself. The mill that we're in was built in 1811, and probably by Napoleonic prisoners of war, it's believed. So we have no written proof, but we have sort of verbal passed down that it was. So that, people like to hear a little bit about that. And also we have a great sort of philanthropist who came from Okehampton called Sidney Simmons, and he did a lot for the town. And he was actually born in the cottage in our courtyard that's now the Victorian tea room. So he came from very poor background, but worked his way up and was very clever and ended up being a multi-millionaire. He bought the castle grounds and gave the castle to the people of Okehampton. He built a hospital, he built almshouses, and he created a beautiful park here called Simmons Park that runs along the river and you can actually walk through the park straight out onto Dartmoor itself, which is a really lovely thing to do. So we're very grateful to Sydney. So people like to come here and hear a little bit about him, and then I show groups around the museum. And we also do special tours. I sometimes do tours for people who are visually impaired, and I allow them to touch quite a lot of the collection, which obviously we don't encourage generally. But obviously in those cases, it really makes the experience much better.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're happy to do any kind of tour, really, as long as people book with us beforehand, because I'm obviously not here all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it sounds like you're really quite an accessible place. Do you allow people to take dogs in?
Obviously, any kind of assistance dog is allowed in, but we don't allow big dogs. We say if you can carry your dog, you can take your dog round, but we don't allow larger dogs, mainly because we find that in the farming section downstairs, we've got the original cobbled floors. We've got a lot of old carts and tractors and things that have come off farms and smell quite farmy still, even after all these years. And unfortunately, dogs think that means that they can relieve themselves of it. So we've had to, unfortunately, say no to that. But quite often I sit with a dog in my office. So I look after people's dogs while they go around, or sometimes the volunteers will do the same thing if they're happy to do that. Or people can take it one at a time. One sits outside with the dog and they swap over.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's lovely. What would you say has been your most memorable moment since working there, Christy?
Oh, so many of them, actually. Difficult to say. I think the first one was when the railway came to Okehampton, and we had a big launch day in the whole town because they reopened the railway line to Okehampton. So that was a major thing after a long time. So we had an exhibition here, and on that day we opened free of charge to everybody, and all the local people dressed up in sort of Edwardian garb, as it was the first time the railway opened. And we just had such a lot of fun, all the volunteers dressed up. So that was a really lovely day. I've had some really memorable days out on the moor as well. We don't like to just think of the museum being actually within these four walls. So we try to do events out on the moor itself, often connected with whatever our exhibition is. So last year, I did an exhibition called A Shroud for Mother Nature, Is Dartmoor Dying? And we involved a lot of community partners, a lot of people that work on Dartmoor, a lot of local people, from charities down to farmers, asking them questions about whether they thought Dartmoor was dying. And we produced a woolen shroud, which we had over 50 different people needle felting on, and we covered it in needle felted creatures that are, flora and fauna that are endangered now on Dartmoor. And we took that shroud for a walk over the moors and took it in turn to carry it. So we went a little bit on the old Litch Way, which is where they used to carry the dead across the moors. And we carried Mother Nature's shroud across the moors, and it was a glorious day. Loads of people turned up to walk with the shroud and to take it in turns carrying her. And it was, very, very beautiful. And then we also did a little ceremony in a roundhouse as well. And in memory of all these species that we've lost, and in hope that we can save the ones that are still there.
Yeah, that does sound very memorable. So how much does it cost to visit the museum?
So for a single adult, it is £6, and that gives you free entry for a whole year. We do family tickets, so a family for 2 adults, 2 children would be £13. So, but all the prices are available on our website, or any information that people might need. You mentioned access earlier. We've got a fantastic access report on our website with photographs and everything. So if people want to see where they're coming, where they're going to have to manoeuvre, or even if it's just to give them comfort that they know where they're coming, they can find all that on our website, which is, I think you're going to include in the show notes.
It'll be in the show notes, but just tell us what it is anyway, Christy.
It's www.dartmoorlife.org.uk.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much for being my guest today.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Liz. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to Come Here. If you know a heritage attraction that would love to be featured, or you have a suggestion for somewhere you'd like me to cover, I'd love to hear from you. To find my email address and find out more about me, pop to my website at lizdrury.com. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do subscribe, rate and review the show. It really helps other people to find it. See you next time, and come and discover somewhere else worth visiting.